Crowds gathered at the Royal Exchange today for the city proclamation, the historic ceremony at which His Majesty King Charles III was proclaimed as the heir to the late of Queen Elizabeth III. The new king has just returned to Buckingham Palace following that meeting of the Accession Council at St. James's Palace. There were loud cheers from the crowds gathered there as the sovereign's vehicle flying the royal standard drove through the gates. Trumpets played God Save the King was proclaimed, and King Charles III paid tribute to the Queen in an address to members of the Accession Council. Today's historic proceedings have never been seen before on camera. The last time these proceedings took place was in 1952, after the death of the Queen's father. It was the decision of King Charles III to allow television cameras into the Accession Council for the first time to allow the public to view the proceedings. This is All 24 News special coverage.
My whole life, whether it be long or short.
Hello and welcome to the program. I'm your host, Karim Zachary. And before we bring in our guest, here's what's on today. We have witnessed King Charles III being proclaimed as a monarch during an Accession Council ceremony at St. James's Palace proclamation, which comes after a paid moving tribute to his mother, the Queen, who died on Thursday at Balmoral.
I, Charles III, by the grace of God, of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and of my other realms and territories, King, Defender of the Faith, do faithfully promise and swear that I shall inviolably maintain and preserve the settlement of the true Protestant religion as established by the laws made in Scotland in prosecution of the claim of right, and particularly by an act intituled An Act for Securing the Protestant Religion and Presbyterian Church Government, and by the acts passed in the Parliament of both kingdoms for union of the two kingdoms, together with the government, worship, discipline, rights and privileges of the Church of Scotland. So help me God.
All right, let's bring in our guest now. Joining us live via Skype from UK is Mehdi Bahi, a political activist and a blogger from London, and also Emmanuel Pouchelet, a geopolitical analyst from Paris, France. Very warm welcome indeed. Let's kick it off with you, Mr. Mehdi Bahi. Many argue that Elizabeth II leaves a space behind that is unlikely to be filled. In other words, King Charles III has bigger shoes to fill. How do you read that yourself?
It's quite a very good question to answer, and it's a big thing that at the moment the British public is discussing and talking about. First of all, it's quite hard to come and take such a role after Her Majesty the Queen, 70 years, and I don't really think that there are a lot of people on this planet these days that they know Britain without Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth II. So his role will be very, very difficult. I believe he will somehow have to take all the advice that you have gave to him, and I believe that over the last 70 years he was getting ready to fulfill this role. He was a person that has his ups and downs when he was the Prince of Wales, especially with the breakdown of his ex-wife of Diana. So there is some difficulties in taking this role. However, and after what I have heard yesterday, the speech that he have gave to the public, I was extremely pleased with it. He came across as a very friendly person. He came across as a person who was willing to take and carry on the roles that his mom has been taking over 70 years, as we have said. So it will be a difficult position for him. However, from what I have seen so far, I think he will be good for the job and for serving the public and the monarchy.
Very nice indeed. And in the same context, Mr. Manuel Pouchelet, the monarchy of the future will not be the same. Much careful thought in which Parliament has a need to be properly consulted, and a right to give its final approval must be given both to reform of the royal finances and the civil list, most immediately the coronation, which is a religious ceremony that is unique among the European monarchies, which must be also debated. This is what most analysts are arguing. What is your thought on that in particular?
To face new challenges, and King Charles III is ready to carry out his new job, in fact. And we know that today there is a movement inside the Commonwealth who is ready to move concerning institutions. We know that in Australia a movement is growing of having a new kind of regime, but also it's in Europe, Britain, and Great Britain, I mean the United Kingdom, has always answered back to the challenges he had to face with. So in fact, I think a reform is a requirement today, but maybe step by step, not immediate. Because when a reform is not very well prepared, you have always drawbacks, and it's difficult for the king and also for the British society to move on. The first big impact is the Brexit. And we saw today the big consequences of this wish of the British population and its consequences, not only in the UK but also in Europe and also in worldwide. So I think that today they have to move on new topics, reforms, but maybe with a consultation. I'm talking about maybe a referendum. But the monarchy went through the ages, and it always works. So I think the main challenge concerning King Charles III is not this reform, but to face with crisis in Europe, in China, and other parts of the world.
Indeed. And just to elaborate a little further on this, Mr. Mahdi Bahi, more on the same, or more would actually argue that King Charles III comes to the throne at the age of 73, and being the first university graduate to reign in modern times, he may prove a more transitional figure than seemed likely if he had succeeded perhaps to the throne at earlier age. So at this stage of his life, and with the country so fragile in so many other ways, he may have to serve as a reforming king. What's your perspective on that? What kind of reforms can he bring on?
I really believe that Charles will not be the same as Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth II, as she was a little bit behind the scene, not talking much about politics. I believe I have never ever heard Her Majesty the Queen talking or mentioning anything about the big argument that the Parliament have had during the Brexit and during getting out of Europe. It was really a scandal at that time in the Parliament, and it was a big matter in the public in Britain. So we didn't really hear much from Elizabeth II. However, now I believe, and I have a sense to believe, that Charles III will not be the same as Elizabeth II. He will be a bit outspoken, and he will have to share his views as he have before.
Well, of course, his opinions are actually known. I mean, political opinion are actually known because he made sure to express them before, but he was not a monarch at that time. But now he was vowing that he would actually follow the path of his mother, Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth III. Do you think that he can actually do that? And you're affirming that perhaps he's going to be different, but then a monarch, especially a British monarch, is known not really to get involved, seeing the Constitution.
That's really a very hard question to say at the moment, as we have to see what and how he is going to be in the next, let's say, 12 to 16 weeks, and what his views are going to be. He will be going either ways, and as you have said, follow the path of his mom or carry on the way he is. And I believe that he will not be carrying the way of his mom. He's an outspoken person. He always been like that. He will always share his views, and I believe that he will share them cleverly rather than outspokenly, as he did when he was a Prince of Wales. So he will be a little bit different to his mom. He will not be a person that sits in the shadow and not discuss anything in regards to politics and regards to views, and I believe that he will be a world-leading person in the matter of global warming and environment, especially as he always been there and wanted to do a change in regards to this matter.
And almost everything about the world changed unrecognizably since the day in 1952 when Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II came to the throne. But Queen Elizabeth, stoic and formal, was always there and always the same. Her death now, quiet and somehow sudden, removed the bastion of constancy and steadiness, just at a moment when Britain and the world seem more disoriented and volatile than in decades. Can we say, Mr. Manuel Pouchelet, that King Charles III now inherits a nation that is divided economically on the ropes? So what exactly, according to your perspective, is King Charles III bracing for? And how difficult is his mission?
Yes, King Charles III is a witness of the 20th century. And even if in the protocol he was just behind Her Majesty the Queen, he's got a point of view and an overview of the challenges that the kingdom will have to face with and how the kingdom answered in the past. Of course, the history of the UK is very rich. And since 1952, the world changed. But I can say that since the year 2000, something accelerated in Europe and in the whole world, you know. So I think that King Charles is already ready to face with these new challenges and have a strong answer. But I think to answer to these questions, he will need the help of the Prime Minister, the new Prime Minister, Mrs. Truss, and I think that this tandem is already ready to answer. We saw the first decisions did by the Prime Minister concerning energy. I mean, I'm talking about a bill, because the bill today is very important. But of course, yesterday, King Charles III, during his speech to the nations, spoke about Commonwealth. I think maybe his foreign policy will go through Commonwealth. And Commonwealth is a great help for UK when it's facing with economical problems, because it's a very strong organization, of course. But he will also need Commonwealth help, because we know that inside the Commonwealth, we have some countries who are partners of Russia, and maybe the European partners of UK will need to have some answers to this behavior, you know. And King Charles will have to give the good answers using diplomatic languages, you know, and it will be difficult for him, yes.
And as part of the ceremonies, gun salutes were fired by the British military across the UK amid ringing church bells to mark the death of Queen Elizabeth II. 96 rounds fired from the Tower of London and Hyde Park in honour of the number of years the Queen lived. The King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery fired the death gun salute in Hyde Park, London. And Mr. Mehdi Bahi, at home, while a sudden surge in republicanism seems unlikely, but the new king and his heir apparent, Prince William, the new Duke of Cornwall, must reshape the institution for the 21st century if it is to prosper, or at least survive. How challenging do you think this is going to be, in your opinion?
It is quite challenging, especially over the last 10 to 20 years. You start hearing a lot of rumors from the British public in regards to why are we having a queen? It's costing a lot of money to the taxpayer. I believe that a big debate is happening at the moment in Canada since Her Majesty the Queen had died. All over the news and radio stations are talking about this subject at the moment regarding why should we as taxpayers fund such institution and such monarchy. However, these rumors are really, and I believe that they are coming out from people that they have no really an idea or views of how this institution works. As an example, the Canadian taxpayers do not pay anything to the British monarchy unless a king or a queen visits Canada, and then the state of Canada funds such visit. So they are not, while they are in the United Kingdom, they are not having anything out of the money of the taxpayers in Canada. The same in the UK, and I believe quite a few years ago, the same subject came up, and a lots of rumors were going on why shouldn't we not be a republic, and why should we have such monarchy. And then the royal family came out and said and explained and showed to the board and to the public that they are already such an organization that they have enough funding, they have already a financial institution behind them that fund them, and they do not really require a lot, and they even fund the tax treasury. So it's I believe it's a subject that it is for the royal family to discuss. They need to be more, how can I say the word in English, more open and share with the media and with the public the exact details of such fundings and such money, because I believe the only issue that the public have at the moment, it's related to money and it's related to tax. But in the other side, there is a lot of British people that are pro-monarchy. They do like the royal family. Just to share with you that they do bring a lot of tourists into London. They are an attraction and a big source of money to Britain, and they are really employing a lot of people directly and indirectly into the tourism industry. So it is really a matter of them being open to the public and explaining how the institution work. And I believe that they will carry on and manage to survive, as I can see after the death of Her Majesty Elizabeth Queen II, the amount of sympathy and union from the British people is amazing, and it's great. So they will carry on as they are.
And what about you, Mr. Manuel Pouchelet? As Mr. Mahdi Bahi was highlighting and underlining the fact that the Queen's passing could have equally consequential reverberations, let's say, after a period of reflection, Commonwealth nations where she was head of state, like Canada and Australia, with young populations that have diversified far beyond British ancestry, may wonder whether it's finally time to, let's say, sever last links with the homeland and perhaps would like to be independent states. How likely is that, Mr. Manuel Pouchelet?
Yes, I think it's a good question today because the monarchy has to evolve, and of course it's not the time as before. I don't think so that at the moment it is the main topic of these countries. Staying inside the United Kingdom is important. I'm talking, of course, about the Commonwealth, because today we have a lot of competitions through the world, and we need to have strong alliances. I am talking about the new alliance, which is named BRICS. And of course, some Commonwealth countries will face with these competitions. I am talking about natural resources. I am talking about security and defense system. We know that, for example, in the Pacific area, the Americans have built up the AUKUS, with Australia and, of course, regrouping South Korea, Japan, and New Zealand to face with China's containment, okay? And it's important. We know that Mr. Boris Johnson, when he was Prime Minister, decided to give strong help to the USA in the Pacific area, which is very far away from Europe. Of course, the Great Britain and the UK is a very strong partner of Europe concerning defense topic. But I think that today, concerning Canada, Australia, the debate is not ready for now. I mean, inside the mentality, even if today a lot of topics are running fast, you know. So I think that concerning your question, the best is to keep the unity of the kingdom, to help King Charles III to face with the challenges and to answer very well to the challenges, because the world has become competitive, and it's not time to remove alliances and to move away from this kind of system. You know, it's a very important milestone for the Commonwealth citizens and also for the UK citizens.
Very nice indeed. And just as part of the info that we are sharing here with our audiences, parts of British life that have remained unchanged for decades will now be transformed to mark the reign of King Charles III. For the first time in 70 years, the national anthem words will change. God Save the Queen to God Save the King. And Charles' image will replace his mother's on new coins, banknotes and stamps. It's traditional for the new monarchy to face the opposite direction to their predecessor. So Charles' image will face left because the Queen faced right. The royal cipher will change. That's the monogram used on everything from mailboxes to police uniforms. Currently, it features the Queen's Elizabeth II Regina stamp below an image of the crown. And there will also be legal changes. Senior lawyers will become the King's Council rather than the Queen's Council, and the government will now be known as His Majesty's government and not Her Majesty's. Back to you, Mr. Mahdi. Will Britain search for a post-Brexit role as a middling world power have to go forward without its most valuable foreign asset? How challenging can that be?
It is at the moment quite challenging, especially after what we are seeing in Ukraine. To be isolated and to be on your own, I believe that union, especially in Europe, have to carry on being the way it is to survive. We all see in the price rise, not only in the UK, all over the world, and especially in Europe. Me personally, I have visited 4 or 5 European countries in the last week, and I can see the pricing increasing everywhere and in every single corner in Europe, from down south up to down up in the north. So the UK. At the moment, I don't believe, first of all, they will be backward going back to being in the European Union. This is a matter of the past. And even people that they were with staying in the European Union do believe now that this is a fact and we need to carry on being the way we are. Europe remains to be an ally and a strong ally and a very close ally to the UK. In the other hand, and as you might know, that Britain have very close allies with the US. So, but as I have said, Europe. It's very important to the UK. All our goods comes from most of our important goods come from Europe. So it's important to remain a very good friend of Europe. And I believe really, and I even urge His Majesty King Charles III to have a second visit, because I believe that his first state visit might be to an Anglo-Saxon country. I wouldn't be surprised if it's not the United States, but I would really urge him to have his second state to France or to Germany or to some European country to show that we are still close to Europe, and that Europe is still a very strong ally to the United Kingdom, especially in this very difficult time.
Very nice indeed. Then Mr. Manuel Pouchelet, Liz Truss on Thursday called on Britain to come together as a people and support its new head of state. She added that Brighton should rally around Charles III to help him bear the awesome responsibility that he now carries for us all. Now, amidst all these recessionary risks piling up pressure not only on Truss but also on King Charles III, Britain's two new leaders, whose role is, it will be to rally public sentiment during a period of crisis. Do you think they will be successful in rallying public sentiment?
Yes, of course. In this time, it will be difficult to relay the public opinion, of course. But I think at the moment we are living, it's not time to have strong debates on to try to divide the country, you know. I'm talking about the social aspect. We know that in England, electricity bills have become very awful for the population. I have heard that there is a movement of the persons who are refusing to pay the bills.
Yes, indeed.
But and Mrs. The new Prime Minister, Mrs. Truss, the new challenge for her is also to carry on and to carry out what was going on before too. You know, she's got to. I think that the orientation is to answer back, to give a strong answer back and an immediate answer, an immediate response to what's happened at the moment. I'm talking about the crisis in Europe. I'm talking about the social crisis through all over the countries of Europe and in the world due to the conflict in Ukraine, of course, and its deep consequences. And of course, also to redefine some new relations with Commonwealth, with Europe, with Russia, with China, where a lot of countries are involved, you know. And of course, we know that the public opinion, and it reminds me the words of the former Prime Minister Gordon Brown, when he said, if you don't succeed, you will have to leave. And of course, election is a good indicator to say if you are right or if you are wrong. And I think this is the coming challenges for Mrs. Truss, of course. And she announced that she would like to build her internal politics on Mrs. Thatcher, but today Mrs. Thatcher's politics was good during the 1980s, with of course deep consequences on the kingdom. Yes. But today we are in 2022, and I'm not so sure that it will be the same thing, of course. Absolutely, yes. Because you have to take into account a lot of other parameters on the volatility of the situation. I'm talking about the international scene here, will require you to have a strong unity, of course. And I think the UK is able to answer to this question. With unity, of course.
Very nice indeed. Now, let's take a look at what to expect in the hours and days ahead. After being declared that he was sovereign by the Accession Council, King Charles III will meet Prime Minister Liz Truss again and her cabinet on Sunday. The Queen's body will be taken to the Palace of Holyrood House in Edinburgh. A procession will take place the day after the public may get to file past her coffin into St. Giles Cathedral. Her body will be then taken to London on Tuesday. And from Wednesday, she'll lie in state for 4 days to allow people to pay their respects. Senior royals will stand guard at some stage in average in a tradition known as the Vigil of the Princess. Funeral is expected to take place at Westminster Abbey on Monday, September 19th. 2 minutes of silence will be observed nationwide. The Queen will then be laid to rest in a chapel in Windsor Castle, alongside her parents, sister Margaret, and her husband Philip. Back to you, Mr. Mahdi. Perhaps it's too early to tell what sort of role the new king may want to play, But how do you see those calling for the British monarchy to do away with the myths of imperial benevolence that still suffuse its ceremonies and activities, and those saying that we should also acknowledge that an antiquated version of monarchy must now pass into history?
I really do not believe that there is any British people that they still believe in the imperial, and that Britain is still the empire that it used to be a few years ago. Yes, there are few here and there that they do still believe that Britain could stay and play a role that it did play a few years ago in controlling a lot of parts around the world. And there is a saying that they say the British flag was always under the sun, and that's to prove how strong the empire used to be a few years ago. From north to west, from south to north, they were everywhere. And I believe that the royal family at that time were much more involved in politics, and they were much more into controlling the government and playing a big role in guiding the British army. But these days things has changed, and especially Elizabeth II has changed a lot of things. And she pushed the royal family slowly in a very clever way.
Mr. Mehdi Bahi, thank you so much for all these thorough analysis. Unfortunately, we have reached the end of our program. Mr. Manuel Pushley, thank you so much for joining us as well. Thank you too for keeping it here on All 24 News. With this, ladies and gentlemen, our special coverage comes to a close. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.